Possibly by the time you watch this presentation, the English dub for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure should be available, depending if there's any delays in its English release. As I'm currently making this video in the month of July 2015, I will be using the Japanese audio instead of the English. The last video focused on what makes JoJo interesting, such as its art style, over-the-top tone, and its roots to Fist of the North Star. This time, we'll speak of JoJo's sequel being Part 2, Battle Tendency. Taking place 50 years after the events of Phantom Blood, Battle Tendency offers a lot of new qualities which supports itself as a successful sequel. To begin, our main lead is Jonathan Joestar's grandson, Joseph Joestar. Unlike his gentle manly grandpa, Joseph still cherishes his family, but can be very immature and humorous. As a result, one of the new additions to the JoJo series was its gradual change into a comedic story. In our previous part, we have seen several wacky ideas, but nothing was as ridiculous than Jonathan dropping an anvil. That is straight up Looney Tunes. But now our comedy comes from our hero Joseph and ups the ante by having several quotes that will later become part of the collection of JoJo memes.
Happy Reppy Yoropikune! Oh no! Double shock!
Depending on your perspective, these newly added jokes can interfere with the horror tone, or you could accept it for what it is, as JoJo will only get more hilarious and a bit random in its future installments. Yet, a lot of fans both new and old can say that the usage of humor in Part 2 was excellent, which led to mass appeal for Joseph Joestar. Another key difference that makes Part 2 a good sequel are the villains. In Phantom Blood, our enemies were vampires and zombies who were manufactured by the Stone Mask, but now we focus on the creators of said mask being the ancient tribe known as the Pillarmen, who compose of Santana, Wham, AC/DC, and Cars. These Pillarmen are similar to vampires as they still have the weakness of sunlight, but are creatures which dominate the food chain, as Pillarmen can eat vampires by simply touching them. They also have their specified abilities being wind, heat, and light. Their objective is to obtain dominion over the sun, thus they need the Stone of Asia to be melded onto a stone mask. This arc contains a good chunk of main villains in contrast to Part 1, which mostly consisted of henchmen and one main villain. But like its predecessor, Battle Tendency follows the same masculine concepts of family lineage, honor, and manly friendship. As mentioned before, a recurring theme of JoJo is family lineage, and Part 2 possibly has the greatest emphasis on this idea, with the return of the Zeppeli family, being represented by Caesar Zeppeli. Following their grandfather's footsteps, both Joseph and Caesar have a destiny to battle against evil, but as fate would have it, these characters don't get along. While Jonathan and Zeppeli had a student-master relationship, Joseph and Caesar have a rivalry, which eventually turns into a manly friendship, as they got each other's back. This is definitely a step up from Part 1, as the characters have more time to interact with each other, thus creating a closer bond due to their younger ages and growth from their rough first impression. Caesar's heroic act of friendship is one that encouraged Joseph to mature, which is on par with Jonathan's growth. Jonathan, being raised as a gentleman, always had this sense of heroism, while Joseph is a character who became mentally mature as the story progressed. But aside from characters, what else makes JoJo appealing? In our previous video, I failed to mention the martial art known as the Ripple, or its other names such as Hamon or Senko. This fighting style has both healing and destructive properties, which once again is a reference to Fist of the North Star. Kenshiro was the 64th successor to the assassin fist known as Hokuto Shinken, or the Divine Fist of the North Star. This martial art can strike a person's pressure point, resulting in complete control of the human body, but was typically used to blow people up. However, this deadly martial art also showed traits of creating miracles such as curing blindness and sickness, making the wounded walk again, and even extending a person's life. The Ripple in JoJo bears many similar traits, but also has plenty of variation, which usually consists of breathing techniques and giving a power-up to certain weaponry. However, the most common thing these martial arts have in common are their signature techniques, being the 100 crack fist and the sunlight yellow overdrive. Kenshiro being inspired by Bruce Lee would attack with battle cries of atatata, along with rapid fire punching using the North Star 100 crack fist, aka the Hokuto Hyakuretsuken. In JoJo, Jonathan uses a sunlight yellow overdrive, which is a barrage of rapid fire punching, but is said with a creed instead of a battle cry. For a while, the Ripple was the iconic superpower of or fighting style of JoJo, but this would change in part 3, but before we get to that, it's time for the JoJo Poses. In the presentation for part 1, I mentioned Araki having difficulty in creating his own art style, but part 2 is where his art would commence its growth for flamboyancy with its signature JoJo Poses. Like any comic or movie poster, poses are essential for marketing, as we've seen not only in magazines or advertisements, but for many works of fiction. A pose can help identify a character or a group, whether it's being parodied or used in a teaser, but a pose may even lead to certain disputes over plagiarism as seen in 2010, with the comic Incarnate, bearing many similar panels from manga such as Bleach and Hellsing. JoJo makes full use of posing even in part 1, or in Araki's other works such as Gorgeous Irene. Yet the posing and battle tendency is what popularized the concept. The anime takes advantage of the original poses by having a dramatic entrance, which is often caused by having a still image make a rapid zoom out, which manages to portray its stylish presence. However, these poses would cause the start of JoJo's role in being flamboyant, more so in the anime due to numerous colors used throughout the show and its opening. While JoJo poses are definitely what makes JoJo unique, it is also the easiest way to parody JoJo. Many anime since JoJo's debut in manga have parodied the series going as far back as the mid-2000s. A lot of thanks goes to JoJo's Bizarre Encyclopedia, as it holds many descriptions and images of these references. However, it is not only anime that reference JoJo, but even games, or most hilariously in the recent Starbomb Smash music video where Luigi does a journal pose. Sadly, I need to go into a confession that these poses are not even original. Most of them, if not all of the JoJo poses, are straight out of other people's artwork or photography. For example, Dio's signature stair pose is modeled after this statue named Unique Forms of Continuity in Space, made in 1913 by Umberto Boccioni. Other poses and even characters seem to be based on works from Antonio Lopez and Tony Viramontes. To be honest, as much as I don't like to say it, I'm pretty sure this heads into a bit of plagiarism. I can understand drawing from a still life as I've done drawings myself, but to constantly do this even to this day, it's kind of upsetting. Especially when there are a lot of JoJo fans who love Araki's artwork, but it does frustrate me that chances are that an image I really like may have belonged to somebody else. For example, I recently made Kenshiro's character profile for my list of top 20 most manly anime characters, which required me to reread the manga. At the same time, Stardust Crusaders was airing, so I would tend to look at the original manga's artwork, which led to some shocking discoveries being very similar panels. The only way to verify which author drew the image first is by checking the chapter release dates in the Shonen Jump magazine. If anyone knows of a site or anything that can confirm the original release dates of these chapters relating to Fist of the North Star, Sakigake Otokujuku, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I very much appreciate it. I know there are other artists that are clearly influenced by other people's work. Even movies such as The Matrix was directly inspired by Ghost in the Shell. Gurren Lagann's Super Robot style is definitely from Ken Ishikawa's Getter Robo. Kill la Kill bears the same story as Cutie Honey, Blaster Knuckle being a western version of Berserk, Super Dr. K bearing traits of both Kenshiro and Blackjack, Griffith being a similar character to Ryo Asuka from Devilman, or how The Lion King was based on Kim of the White Lion. What the problem all comes down to is the artwork, as it's positioned nearly the same as the original piece, and that really frustrates me. In other words, how is this any different from what happened to Incarnate? Is it okay as long as it's not the same character design? Even if it is okay to do this, from an artist's perspective, Araki loses some points from lack of original composition. I'm sorry for ending part 2 with such a downer, but I had to get this off my chest. So tune in next time for part 3, Stardust Crusaders, while I talk about JoJo influencing other manga artists, with Araki's creation of stands and their fans known as personas. Furthermore, the next video will include both horror and music references. I'm the Anime Hero and I review anime so you can enjoy it.